What's up, people in the adventure? It's life's an adventure. That's why we're here. We're adventuring together. Today, we have a wonderful guest named Emily. Um, and as crazy as my day's gone, I completely forgot all the stuff I was going to say to introduce Emily. So why don't you do that yourself? Let us know, who you are, what got you to where you're at, what you do, all that fun stuff.
Yeah, there's so much life lived up to this point for me. But essentially, I'm Emily. What brought me here? So many different things. But I am a holistic strength coach. And so all the different experiences of my life have led me to this moment in time. But I've gone through a lot, as has everyone else. My story is kind of one that started with like a self-diagnosis in a way, and then it led me to using different prescriptions and over-the-counter drugs. And then what kind of led me to being a holistic strength coach is my journey through all of that and experiencing all the different side effects and just realizing what these things were doing to my body. So now I live in a natural way using like things from the earth and just food like as medicine essentially and movement.
Nice. I like food. It doesn't look like it. People get really confused whenever I say that, but I spent so many years not eating because I was high as dog shit on meth all the time. Plus, I like food to begin with, but uh, yeah, I love food, man. Once I hit that age where my metabolism finally decides it wants to slow down, it's gonna be rough for me because man, I love food a lot. I probably eat 3 or 4 meals a day at least.
Hmm.
The people I work with like beg me to just shut up all the time because if they're not talking, because we're all remote, so we have Teams chat, and
Hmm.
if they're not talking, I just start talking about food because
Yeah,
that
it's
that that always brings people together, and then they're like,
hmm
"You suck," because I make all this awesome food, especially foreign
hmm
food. I find it to be much
Oh,
healthier than American food in
yeah.
general.
All the spices and
Oh yeah, like Indian
herbs.
food, Thai
Yeah.
food. I'm getting into the African continent, and it's
Ooh.
shakshuka, I think, is the first one I tried. It's like a
Mm.
breakfast with tomatoes and some other stuff.
That sounds
It's
really good.
amazing. Yeah. So they don't they get kind of mad, and if they ever need an idea for dinner, I got them, which is cool.
Yeah.
Um,
Exploring food is one of my favorite things to do.
yeah,
It's
I could
so
almost.
tasty.
You're not kidding, for real. I mean, I've gotten my wife into making homemade bread, from like good
I just
flour.
did that. I just did that a couple of days ago. It was like a COVID dream that I finally like fulfilled. It took me forever to actually do it. And then I looked at the bread mix that I had. I'm gluten free, so it's a gluten free bread mix. I looked at it and I was like, I'm gonna do this finally. And I had some slices this morning, right before this
Nice.
morning
Yeah,
for me.
I had Japanese milk bread this morning with my breakfast.
I've never had that before. That sounds
I I,
interesting.
I don't think it's gluten free, but I'm sure you could find a recipe for it. But yeah, it's really good. It's got a lot of milk in it. It's super fluffy. Uh,
Ooh.
yeah, it's really good. It's really good.
Oh
Um,
wow.
yeah, I got her a stand mixer for Christmas, which is something she's always wanted. And she's like, "Now I
Yeah.
have no excuse. I have to make
Yeah.
bread." And I'm like, "Yeah, go ahead." Because
That's a funny thing that you said because I don't have one of those. And that's what the recipe said to use. And I was like, well, people had to make bread with their hands before, so I'm just gonna do that and figure it out.
I think what got her started on the journey was I make my own pizza dough. So
Mm,
we don't do like store bought dough or anything. We try and not
yeah.
do like restaurant pizza
Yeah.
unless it's really, really good. There's a couple
Hmm.
places around where I'm at that I actually, or we're super busy and Little Caesars is just all you got.
Hmm.
But
Yeah, making your own
Yeah.
pasta too, that is something special.
That's my next that's my next step.
You'll love it.
That's my next step. I uh yeah, I just haven't gotten around to doing that part of it yet. But she saw me
It's
making
fun.
pizza bread or pizza dough, and doing that whole thing. And she was like, well, if you can do it, I can make bread because I'm not a baker at all.
Hmm.
She's the baker of the two of us by far. And she's like, if you can
Hmm.
fucking do it. Anyway. So prescription medication, since this is a
Yes.
podcast about drugs and not food. This happens to me all the time. Somebody just even briefly mentions food and I'm like off to the races, like my clients I deal with all the time. They're like, I have to be careful to just not talk about food or else we're going to be talking for like 30 minutes about this or but
Yeah, I could talk about food forever too. So,
yeah. So you said prescription medication and over the counter medication. Like what was the deal
yeah.
with that? I mean, you said all right, so starting with the self-diagnosis and then moving forward.
Yeah. So, the self-diagnosis was like in high school, but at that point, my parents were like, "You're fine. Everything's great. Like, you don't need anything. Like, you don't have." I was like, "I have ADHD. I know it." Like, to my bones. Like, and they're like, you're fine, you're perfect. But I was really struggling in college. I almost failed out like my first semester. Um, so I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go to see a psychiatrist because I'm 18 now, and I'm gonna go get a prescription for Adderall or whatever it is because I was failing out of school. Um, and I did. I got it. And sure enough, I mean, like it's so easy for a psychiatrist to write. Like there's no real test for ADHD, I feel like they could have like a questionnaire and they just like ask you about your habits and like your childhood and whatever. Um, but so I got it and it helped me like of course it helped me like it definitely works, I feel like for anybody. And it's one of those things too where I feel like you see all of the side effects that could potentially happen, but it's like, oh, that's not going to happen to me. You like think that you're like kind of invincible, in a way, or at least I did. And sure enough, like as time went on, I had like so many of the side effects on the list, to those drugs, and they overprescribed me for sure. I didn't know though. I was just a kid, essentially, and I was just like listening to the doctor and like what to take and when, but it was pretty bad. It led me down like, it's the heart racing, it's the can't sleep at all, and it then turned into psychosis and depression and anxiety, which then they were trying to write me more prescriptions for to solve that. But then it turned into the over-the-counter sleep medications because I couldn't sleep. I was smoking weed every single day, all day, to help me like counteract all of the uppityness of the Ritalin and the generic amphetamines that I was on. Um, and yeah, and some pretty bad combinations with alcohol, getting me into some pretty gnarly situations in college. Um, and it was just like it was like a whole bunch of there were so many things that I was doing that it was hard in the moment to like pinpoint what it was that was like negatively affecting me. And but at that point too, I felt like I was relying on the ADHD medication to help me because it was the only thing that like essentially got me out of bed and getting me through my college years. So yeah, and I mean, and it wasn't even just taking it, like I was definitely abusing it, like snorting that and using it to go out, like instead of like cocaine. It's just like we would snort that and then go party. Um, so just it was just like a combination of a bunch of things, but ultimately, like, I started taking like ZQL, no, NyQuil. I would sit in the library and I would time out, like it would get close to like 11:30 p.m. When I would get close to the end of like my study session, I would pop a couple of NyQuils. I wasn't even sick. I was just like, I know that this is gonna help me like feel drowsy. So I would pop some NyQuil and then I would walk home, smoke some weed, and then go to bed. Um, and then it got to a point where the drowsiness, like I realized if you fight it off, you get this like really weird high from it.
Yep.
So like I would fight off the drowsiness. Like this is what like I was at first taking the NyQuil to sleep. And then it turned into me taking NyQuil. And then I was like, okay, I'm not sick. I'm going to take ZQuil. So I started taking ZQuil just to fight the drowsiness and get that like weird buzz um, from that. And I was doing that for at least a month. And then I finally looked at the package and it was like, don't exceed over a week. And I was like, oh shit. I've been taking it for like at least a month. So that's
Yeah, amphetamines are fun.
part of it.
Like I've never I find and maybe it's just because I don't understand the brain chemistry of all of it, but like as much methamphetamines as I consumed, could just never get my mind wrapped around how the fuck is Ritalin and Adderall and this other shit like gonna really help people. Yeah, it'll help you focus, but I knew all those other side effects were gonna come. And like
Hmm.
I was living on Ohio State's campus at one point in my
Mm.
drug dealing career. And I knew all these kids who were taking Adderall and Ritalin and shit for class and all this other shit. And I'm like, you guys don't understand. Like, you could end up where I'm at in like 2 seconds, and you
Hmm.
don't want to be here. I'm here, but that doesn't mean I want to be here, you know? And
Hmm.
now there's, I think there have been a couple documentaries about, the Adderall revolution, college students taking it to do basically what you were trying to do, like be able to slow your brain down enough to focus on something,
Hmm.
but over time, you no longer pay attention to that part of it.
Hmm.
You get sucked into the I'm gonna stay awake. I have more energy to go hit the club. I get like
Hmm.
what happened with you, like um one of
Yeah.
the things I heard without you actually saying is that at some point you crossed the line. Like
Yeah.
there's that line, the Rubicon, that goes from socially acceptable to addiction.
Hmm.
And the second you're scraping the coating off of the Adderall, so that way it's no longer time release, and you're shoving it up your nose. I would say you probably passed that line. I mean, I know people who went way farther with it than that, but they were also buying it off of the street. They weren't prescribed it. Like no
Yeah.
doctor would be like, I'm going to give you amphetamines because they were
Yeah.
already on meth. Like, what's that going to do? Amphetamines are nothing
Hmm.
compared to some ice. It's just,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, you're exactly right. And that's kind of the theme, like with a lot of different things in my life is, and luckily I've been self-aware enough to recognize up to a certain point where it's like, okay, this is negatively affecting my life. I need to stop. But then it's really fucking hard to stop because you have built like this reliance. It becomes a part of your routine, and you're like, I don't know what I'm going to do without this. And then it's like, thinking about like how you're going to just up and change your life, like, because you've been doing something a certain way for so long. And then there's that aspect of it. But then it's just like moving through all the transitions of like that, like your readiness to change. And it took me a while to stop. But I quit taking it. I was like, I can do this on my own. Like I'll figure it out because the negative side effects were outweighing like the benefits of the drug. So I finally stopped, and it's been, how old am I? I think it's been like almost 5 years, 4 or 5 years since I've come close to the ADHD medication or like any, well, I don't want to say like any stimulant, but those ones in particular, I gave that up. I was just like, I'm gonna manage whatever distracted symptoms I have on my own, because it just wasn't worth it to me anymore.
Well, I
The
mean, I think,
anxiety was real.
yeah, I think that's something a lot of other people of your era who kind of got into that Adderall thing, have
Hmm.
figured out. Like the documentaries that I've seen that about it. Because I was a chemist,
Yeah.
an amateur chemist at that. I
Hmm.
mostly dealt in street pharmaceuticals. I was certainly not working for Merck or any of those guys. That's for sure. Uh,
Hmm.
but knowing what I know about, the background of that stuff, it's like even just Sudafed, people don't realize that like the active ingredient in Sudafed is only one molecule different than an amphetamine, just
Hmm.
one little oxygen molecule. And I mean, as complicated of a chemical structure as it is, right? You can not even notice, that you're going from a quote unquote hard drug like even prescribed amphetamines to over
Hmm.
the counter medication. Um, and because it's even more socially acceptable and it's so
Hmm.
much easier to
Yeah, to get your
rationalize
hands
it
on.
out, right? Because, especially if you're prescribed something from a psychiatrist, for example, like that's okay because there's a professional who's saying you need this. So it's
Hmm.
cool. Now,
Hmm.
if you cross that line, you keep using that rationalization to counterbalance
Right.
all of the side effects and all the other crap that you're going through. But that, as you found, leads you down a much more insane road than
Yeah.
is worth it.
Yeah, it was scary too. Especially when the psychosis would happen. That would never happen to me before. I was so confused. I like still remember to this day how like scared I was in the moment and how confused it made me. And yeah, again, it could have been a combination of that with like um weed, just like I don't know if it was like high THC, but that like at that point too, I was living in Pennsylvania. I went to Penn State, so the weed there is just like you just get it from whoever. You don't know what strain it is. It's just like it's just weed. And after that point, I like see, and like I didn't even know. I thought it was the weed, but my friends were also smoking the same weed, and like that didn't happen to them. So, and everybody's body is different, but I was just like, I am not. I just didn't even know what to think. It was so scary. And then from that point too, I was like, I'm gonna start being more careful about my weed too. So I ended up getting a medical marijuana card, um, which helped my like ease my mind. Like, okay, I'm like controlling what I'm doing more, like, you know, I started doing more CBD at that point. Um, But yeah, you like when you're doing it and you have the prescription from the psychiatrist, you're like everything's fine. Like I'm supposed to be taking this. Like at least that's what I thought. I'm like I have to. Like I felt like there's no other option for me than to take it. And especially in its prescribed amounts, like I'm a small person. They were prescribing me 60 milligrams of Ritalin every day. And that was a fuck ton, like for me. Like
I
my
mean,
heart felt like it was gonna explode out of my chest.
that's a lot for most people. I mean, we would do the, there were kids on Ohio State's campus that would trade us their Ritalin prescriptions for meth, right? Because it's so much of a quicker hit. You can smoke it, you can do whatever you want with it, and it's you can take less. So, me being who I was, like, sure, yeah, I'll trade you a little bag of meth for 5 Ritalin. 60 milligrams would have got me fucking going great
Hmm.
on even with the meth. Like, I knew there was a difference with that stuff because it's time released and it lasts longer, and then I didn't end up doing less of my own products. So yeah, I mean, just being a normal person and being prescribed that's gonna it
Yeah,
doesn't
and
it
I didn't
doesn't
know.
yeah, it doesn't I mean, yeah, cannabis can cause anxiety and that kind of stuff, but when you're consuming a massive amount of amphetamines, yeah, psychosis is going to happen. Like, there's
Hmm.
no way around that. I mean, you can look back through history and see what those kind of stimulants do to people. Sigmund Freud started with the hey, cocaine every now and then it's cool, to
Hmm.
I should have never told people that. Like, my bad,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Uh, and I mean, on a darker note, I mean, Hitler started to fuck up when he really got into amphetamines. Like, he started to go into a psychosis, but
Mm.
I mean, it was a different amphetamine, much much more potent. He was getting it injected. Plus, he was already batshit crazy to begin with. That doesn't fucking
Hmm.
help. Uh,
Yeah.
but so I mean, you look at someone who's just trying to take the shit to be able to focus on stuff that they need to focus on. You
Hmm.
can slide into that psychosis super quick because you're not looking out for it. You feel like you're
Yeah,
in a
I
safe
didn't
space.
know like at all. And that's what like really frustrated me about the whole thing. And I know not all doctors are bad and not all psychiatrists are bad, but there are some out there that like I feel like that psychiatrist should have known better and like looked at me and my size and been like, yeah, no, this is like 60 milligrams of Ritalin is like way too much. But again, everybody's body is different, and some people, I don't know, maybe need that, but I feel like nobody really needs like that much if, just to like calmly manage the ADHD. But I was just like, this is ridiculous. I ended up telling the doctor, I was like nervous about telling him too. I was like, this is not working for me. Like, it's too much. Like, I can't do it. And it's really easy then at that point when I realized too, I was like, I don't need to be taking 60 milligrams a day. But sometimes I would even take 70, like, because I don't know, I felt like, especially that was like my one of the first times that I was taking it. So it felt like, oh, this is how it's supposed to feel. So I was like measuring every experience, like how I felt on that much Ritalin. And I was like, oh, this isn't strong enough when I like finally went down to 30. And but because that was like my baseline experience was like that much. So and and then you get into it too, it's like it just makes you like don't absorb any food. So like if I had eaten before I took it, I would just like it would all just come out of me and then I wouldn't be hungry the entire day. And so I'm not getting any nutrients in my body. And it just goes down a spiral. Um, yeah, super shaky too.
Yeah.
Strange. And it's like weird to go back to that place as well, like remembering how it all was, because my life is just so different now. I'm just like totally okay with like, oh yeah, I get distracted, but it just like takes a little extra awareness to just bring myself back to the present moment because that's really all it is, like how can I be present to stay focused on what I'm doing. And I was just talking to my roommate about this last night too. We are talking about video games because I used to be like addicted to video games as well. Like it's like a thing that you can do where like you don't need to focus on like anything else. You're just focused on like the game. But for some reason it like hooks you in. and you just sit there and play for hours and you don't even realize how much time is going by.
Yeah.
Pretty wild.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can get addicted to anything. And I mean, anything
Yeah.
can be abused. You know, you bring up over the counter medication. Uh,
Hmm.
I was watching a thing on YouTube the other day about a guy who damn near killed himself on ibuprofen. I mean, like, people wouldn't think, well, that can create an issue. You know, he read the
Yeah.
label, right? And he was like,
Hmm.
take two every 4 to 6 hours. So you can take six a day. So I'll just take seven at a whack because his body was hurting from him, like exercising and
Hmm.
whatnot. And yeah, he got to the point to where like he wasn't even cognitively remembering how often he took it. So he would take seven in the morning, seven around lunchtime, seven at dinner time,
Mm.
and just off the fucking rails,
Yeah.
They've even realized that they have to like monitor people buying cough syrup.
Yeah.
Like back in the day when I was doing, hard drugs, uh, robo tripping wasn't shit. Like we did that all the fucking time, just grab a whole
Hmm.
bottle of Robitussin, drink
Hmm.
it. You're woo, just
Yeah.
looped out for hours, man. I mean, we saw
Yeah.
some crazy shit on that stuff. But
Yeah.
now they figured it out. And I don't really, I don't know, man. Like, especially amphetamines, like having the experience I have, I find it really hard for me to be like, maybe you do need it. I don't think anybody needs that shit at all.
Mm-mm.
Like, I
No.
guess if you're like an extreme case, it could be worth it.
Hmm.
But I mean, we've known for when is 2023 since like the 40s and 50s that the shit was bad for you. Dexedrine back then was the thing for housewives to take, and the house was always
Hmm.
clean. And it's like you were just abusing the shit out of an amphetamine to clean your house. Like, and that's all you're just
Yeah.
walking around drinking coffee all the time, smoking like 100 packs of cigarettes a day, like crazy shit. So once you realized you had this problem, right? You're like mixing all this shit together. It's creating a bad reaction. You're no longer enjoying life at all because they can't.
Mm-mm.
You don't even have to say it. I know it wasn't fun. I've seen
No.
people go through amphetamine psychosis. It did not look like a good time. Like my
Mm-mm.
brain's just not wired to go through that. Like I never, even with the volume of amphetamines and whatnot I consumed, like I never had the psychosis. I wasn't the guy peeking out the window. I wasn't scared for my life. I wasn't freaking out because
Hmm.
like I just don't think like that, right? Like
Hmm.
it's real easy for me to just say fuck it, I'm fine and move on with something else,
Hmm.
right? But a lot of people experience that. So once you started to experience all of that, like what did you do to get past it?
Great question. Yeah. So I think it was like 2 years or so into taking it regularly where I, maybe even 1 year later, I just felt like a completely different person. I didn't remember myself. Like I felt like my personality had changed, and it did. Um, I wasn't thinking good thoughts about myself at all. I wasn't thinking good thoughts about where I was physically, like my environment. I like really wasn't enjoying it. I was and I wasn't. And I was like really in my head about that. Um, I ended up getting like a checkup from a doctor, and he told me that I was depressed after we like went through all this stuff. This is like my primary care like physician, not even like a psychiatrist or a psychologist. Like, so he told me that and was like, I want to prescribe you antidepressants. Is that okay? And I was like, I like flash forward in my head. I was like, well, I'm already taking these drugs and like I'm trying to stop taking like all these other drugs. And I was like, I don't like what the fuck is antidepressants gonna do to me? I feel like that's just gonna make me feel worse. Like, because I've heard stories, my friends like who take antidepressants and they literally got worse. So I was like, no, like I'm not gonna have this. Like I was just like, they were gonna diagnose me with another mental illness and then prescribe me, and then they're gonna diagnose me with another. Like I'm like, so what's next? Like anxiety and benzos. So I was like, no, I'm not. No, like give me a second to like breathe and like figure this out. So that's when I really started to, it was like that was like my wake up call. I was like, I'm depressed. I was like, that's not who I am. Like, I didn't even know what that meant. I was so confused. I actually had to like look up the word. I was like, what is depression? I don't know what that is. And because I guess I was like lucky enough to not have experienced it up until that point. And so I started to like figure out like because I was like I'm not taking antidepressants, so I started doing breath work and meditation guided. I didn't know how to do that stuff before, but I had an app on my phone and I would sit with these headphones and follow some sort of like meditation to just kind of help me. Um, because mood swings were really bad too with because I was taking a ton of melatonin as well. Like I was definitely overtaking melatonin and that was creating mood swings for me. They also had prescribed me birth control that was totally whack with my the level of my hormones. They misprescribed me on birth control. So that was fucking with my moods and all that stuff too. So just big combo of things. So just trying to reduce like all of the external like junk, but it was really hard because I didn't know what I actually needed and what I didn't. So, um, but yeah, so kind of getting diagnosed with depression was like the turning point for me to kind of understand myself better and really understand my patterns, especially when it came to alcohol and like blacking out in combination with the prescription amphetamines and then all that stuff. And I just kind of leaned on like my parents. I called my mom all the time. She heard probably some really dark things from me. It's kind of weird to think back into that time, like where my head was. But I really focused on, because I read this psychology book. I think it was a Jordan Peterson book, like one of his like 12 rules of life or something. And that really helped me put things into perspective. Like I can change my thoughts, and I can change my mind and like change my habits and change my life. So I started kind of putting that into action while I was still in college and like taking the ADHD medication. But it was kind of helping me understand more. I was like taking notes like in my head, like, okay, how did I get here? Like, how did I end up blacked out in this situation? Like, and just kind of reverse engineering certain situations and then yeah, so that was kind of it for me. I just started to be really aware of how I felt, how I wanted to feel, and how could I get to that point.
Right on. So you basically did recovery without actually going into a 12-step program. Because that's pretty much what it is. You know, you realize you got a problem, right?
Hmm.
And once you realize you have a problem, you have to figure out how to fix the problem.
Hmm.
And you know nothing you've done prior to that has fucking worked, or else you wouldn't be where you're at, right?
Hmm.
You basically have to build a support structure around yourself so that way, if you are feeling dark things or whatever, you know, you're not feeling like things are right. You have people to reach out to,
Hmm.
and start actually trying to make the change, right?
Hmm.
Um, which is cool. I'm happy you didn't, you know, you found your own way to do it. Um,
Hmm.
because most people need a lot of fucking help. I'm a 12-step guy myself. I'm not
Okay.
I'm not even trying to play games with it. I tried to do it on my own 21 years ago, and that didn't work at all because 21 years
Hmm.
later, I'm like, holy fuck, I'm killing myself again.
Hmm.
This is bad. And, you know, I went to detox and did some shit.
Hmm.
And now I'm in general doing better. My therapist says I still need help, but that's fine. Um,
Hmm.
and I'm actually taking well, I don't know if it's an antidepressant or not. Uh, I'm
Is
doing
it
some
like
better
a,
living through chemistry, but that's
okay.
fine. I kind of
Yeah.
need to, like
Yeah.
it's
Whatever
working.
works for you.
It's fucking working. That's all I know. If it stops working, then I'm gonna have to figure something else out. But for right now, it
Right.
works. You know, um,
Yeah. That's
and
good.
it's not something I want to do forever either. Because I'm
Hmm.
not a big fan of the pharmaceutical industry personally. I never have been.
Yeah. That's an important thing to recognize. I feel like for yourself too, because I think that there's definitely a good place for antidepressants and serotonin, um, whatever it is. Um, but I don't believe that they were meant to be used for forever. Like it's definitely, you know, one of those things that you use as a tool to get yourself in a better place. So there's definitely a place for them. So I'm glad they're working for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's Prozac was an absolute travesty in my life.
Mm,
I was super skeptical after that whole experience because, there's apparently there's a very small subset of people over the age of 25 who just shouldn't even fucking look at that stuff because
mm,
it hits your brain chemistry in such the wrong way that you go off the fucking rails. I went way off the
mm.
fucking rails. I've already got the addict personality, so
Yeah,
I take everything to a fucking extreme. It doesn't have to be drugs. Just in
yeah,
general, I go to extremes.
yeah.
And I that it took away that last bit of are you sure you should be doing this? To yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah.
And I wasn't at all. And it was so bad that like my therapist at the time, because I've got a different therapist, then it convinced me to get off the Prozac. I like flushed it down the toilet, and she was like, "So, wean yourself off." And I was like, "Oh, I just flushed it all." And she was like, "Okay, well now we got to deal with that." Um, but it is what it is. So now you do the holistic thing, which I dig. Like, what's that all
Hmm.
about? Like, you're obviously, if you're a coach, you're doing this to help other people. Like, what are you doing with that?
Yeah, I love it. So the just with all my experiences, as I was saying, like taking all those things, I've just kind of learned that I've felt my best and I felt like closest with myself and like who I truly am when I'm not totally like, just like numbing. I felt like I was like numbing myself every day. Um, So I was thinking like how can I get back to like the closest version of who I truly am? And it was to eliminate all like external things essentially. But then also like I got really into the idea of like biohacking and like how you can do these tricks to like improve yourself using things like food. Like you can treat, I started learning about people that cured their cancer from changing their diet and their lifestyle. So I thought that was pretty freaking cool. And I started seeing different doctors, ones that I like really trusted. But it took me a while to find them because you have to like actually see them and experience how they take care of you to understand whether or not you trust them. And I finally found a doctor that was like, with the birth control. She was like, the first time I saw her, she was like, get off the birth control and change your diet. And I was like, wow, this is like what I've been waiting to hear. And it's like, I could have done that myself, but for some reason, I like needed a doctor to tell me that that was okay to do because a doctor had originally put me on the birth control. So I was like, I don't know, like, but that's like a completely other story. But
Well, I mean, it's the
so
rationalization. It goes back to that. This person told me to do this. I trusted them. I'm here now. If I just stop doing that, what the fuck do I have? Like, you
yeah,
don't
what's
feel
gonna
comfortable.
happen?
Yeah, you don't feel comfortable because there's not that person to catch you whenever you start to fall. Right.
Yeah.
So like, I totally get that. And fucking birth control, man, that's a whole mess.
Yeah.
That's Jesus Christ.
Super big mess.
Yeah, my man, I'm gonna be honest. I love my wife so much more now that she just doesn't even fuck with any of it. Like
Yeah.
it's so much because she did the pill for a long time and then she switched to
Hmm.
like one of the implants.
Okay.
Yeah, no. She's a better person without any of that shit.
Yeah. And I totally felt that for myself too. I was like, I was dreaming about like how I was going to be not on birth control. I was like so excited because I felt like it was that was also changing my personality, which they've like discovered now that it actually changes like your pheromones or whatever. So in terms of like attraction to like other people, it like totally changes that for you, which is interesting. But yeah, so she was like, get off birth control, uh, stop eating gluten, stop eating dairy, and stop eating like refined sugar and carbs. And I was just like, what the fuck? What am I gonna eat? Like, I had no idea. Like, at that point, I was like drinking a bunch of beer, like eating pretzels and macaroni and cheese, like pizza, like pasta, everything. I was like, what the fuck? When she told me that, I was like, okay, this is a lot different than I expected, but I was like, let me go with it. I'll try it. I'll try it out. She's like, yeah, she told me with like the diagnosis that I had like for hormones, because I have PCOS, supposedly. That's like what it's showing up on like ultrasounds and stuff. But in that case, it's like I'm more prone to diabetes and like all these other comorbidities like obesity, all that stuff. Like weight management with PCOS is a lot harder. So when I changed my diet, I recognized it helped me so much more with my focus too. But also I started like when I quit back to the amphetamines, when I quit those finally, I set myself up to like on an intermittent fasting schedule. So that's what I started doing when I quit that. So I was fasting for about 18 to 20 hours a day. And then I had like a 4 to 6, usually around 4 hour feeding window. And that seemed to like really help me focus at work because I was in a sales job. And I like really needed to be on top of my game. So I heard a lot of really good things about fasting and focus. So once I quit the amphetamines, I started fasting, and that really helped me for a while. And then I started drinking a lot of coffee, and that also that also helped me focus a little bit more. So I kind of like went through this like these periods of time where I was like testing different things, like and now I'm in a period where I notice that if I eat higher, like healthy fats, then my focus is still really good. Um, when I eat things like rice and grains, sometimes it gets a little foggy up here. I get kind of sleepy. So I've just learned to kind of manage my symptoms with the way that I eat and also working out. I adopted movement into my lifestyle when I was depressed. Um, and it completely changed it for me. It like set me into this healthy spiral where like I would work out, so I'd want to eat healthier, and then I just overall like felt better. So that's how I was managing my depression when that was going on. And that's how I still do it too. Like I have to continue to move my body, otherwise I'll slip into these spaces where like my stress is overwhelming and I just start to not feel like myself and it goes back into this like negative pattern. So I pull myself out by like going to the gym or getting outside and going for a run. And so I've just noticed like all these things that in my lifestyle, just by changing my lifestyle, have helped me. And now take, I don't even take Advil anymore. Like I don't take, I used to get allergy shots. I don't even do that anymore. I eat honey. I eat honey and bee pollen now, and instead of like the pain, like the Advil and stuff, I just ride it out. And honestly, I feel like over time my body has just gotten stronger to the point where like I don't even feel like I need it. So it feels pretty cool to have gotten to this point.
It's not a bad space. Um,
Hmm.
and like I said, I mean, a lot of what you're doing are the same principles that work for recovery from addiction, all kinds
Hmm.
of things, because it's basically what we do. Why, like, I'm never going to quit going to NA meetings. I may not go to as many, but I'm never going to
Hmm.
completely stop,
Right.
because that's just a part of the structure of me being able to stay clean is being around other people who are also in the same boat and have the same trauma and the same bullshit, that I've
Yeah.
been through, right? And um so it's that routine, like
Yes.
there's certain parts of my routine that I refuse to give up. Like I journal
Hmm.
every morning about my previous day. So like it helps me
Amazing.
mentally accept what happened the day before, see where I may have fucked up, to be
Hmm.
blunt, and like,
Yeah.
all right, that was totally an obsessive compulsive behavior. I need to not do that anymore and just
Yeah.
kind of slow down a little. Um,
Yeah. And that's a huge part of it too. Like, thanks for bringing that up. It's like learning, especially with this addictive personality or like tendencies, I like to call them. It's like really learning how to be like self-compassionate and not placing like guilt or shame on yourself for acting a certain way or doing something because that can also set you into a negative spiral is like, and because like from and like you said earlier, like taking it to the extremes, it's like I've been taking some time to understand my relationship with alcohol now. And because I've recognized, like, if I have one drink, I'm like, may as well get fucked up. Like, let's drink. Like, let's get drunk. It couldn't be like just one glass of wine for me or like one cocktail. Like, so I've been like picking that apart. And then I would make myself feel bad the next day. Like, why did I do that? Like, and it would just carry over. And then, yeah, kind of, if you're not careful, it can throw you into that like negative cycle where you're just like, well, may as well keep going, like may as well keep doing it. And then it's just like this pattern.
the immortal fuckets. It's like the most evil shit that we feel as human beings, I think,
Yeah.
because it's like once you say fuck it, there's nothing left, right? Like
Yeah.
you're just kind of like fuck it, I'm just gonna keep going because why not?
Yeah.
You take away all the reasons to stop,
Hmm.
like just it's the only way I could sleep, or it's the only way I feel happy, or whatever, whatever it
Hmm.
is. There's so many different things that come from that. So,
Yeah.
based off your experiences, is that what got you into being a coach and helping other people? I'm assuming.
Yeah. I actually started with strength. So personal training, strength and conditioning coach. And as I've kind of gone through that, I've realized, the people that are coming to me for like weight loss or muscle, like lean muscle mass increase, it's like getting really down to like the root of their motivation and like why they want that. Or a lot of people too, it's like, I've done this, but I haven't been able to be consistent. And it's like, okay, well, there's a deeper reason why you may not be creating like sustainable results. Like it's crazy. Like 90% of people spend like in the health industry or whatever, spend money on like weight loss interventions. But a crazy high percentage of that, like of those people never keep the weight off. It always comes back. So it kind of forces you to recognize in a way, like especially working in the industry, like why is that happening? It's not really like the weight loss that's the problem. It's the mindset, it's the other habits that are getting in the way of people actually creating like a healthy change in their life. So I started studying holistic nutrition, and it's completely transformed my life and my confidence to be able to help other people create sustainable change for themselves, because I feel like at this point in my life that I've never felt more connected to like who I am. And it's kind of the idea of like creating all these tools for yourself for like support and like moments where you're like, what do I need right now? Like, is it a drink? No. Like, what's that going to do for me? Like, so I really try to think about now too, like before I do stuff, I'm like, why am I doing this? Like, what's my intention? What's the result that I'm trying to get out of this? Like, is it going to be worth it for me to do this? Like, am I just having a good time, or am I like trying to cover up something else? Like, am I feeling a void right now? Like, really, like, what is it? And that's where journaling helps me too, kind of like sort stuff out for myself and really understand like, can I just have a drink right now and enjoy it? And like a lot of times I'm able to, but I really try to make sure that I'm coming from a place of like love always with myself, because it does get challenging. But yeah, so learning holistic nutrition, it's really not just the food that you're eating. It's like what's the energy like around you? Who are you surrounding yourself with? Because that's going to affect how you live your life and the decisions that you make. If you surround yourself with healthier people, you are more likely to adopt like similar habits as them and become also a healthier person. And same with like the information that you consume, like what's your algorithm on your phone or on your social media or whatever. It's like, what kind of information are you consuming? Because that also has an effect, like on how you nourish yourself. Like, is that going to stress you out? And then all of a sudden you go to the refrigerator and like you pig out. It's like, what's triggering you in other ways, like, and using the food on your plate to kind of like tell you a story in a way, like looking at your plate and being like, okay, let's get curious about what I'm doing. Like, why am I eating this? Or like, that's just like one way of using food kind of as a gateway or a portal to like what you're thinking and how you feel about yourself. Because again, with like, I don't know. So it's kind of like movement and nutrition for like the gateway for me. And then I've learned like that there's so much more behind it. And being able to change my life in the way that I have, it wasn't easy. I feel like I probably could have gotten a lot more support than I did. And I'm really proud that I was able to do it myself in a way. Like I still had my mom and like the support of my friends, which is really important in any situation. Just not even with your parents or whatever, but just who do you have people there to support you that are going to be there for you? Like can you lean on them? And then all of the other things too, and just knowing. And it's a scary place to be. And it's like if you didn't know, like if I didn't know, I probably would have went outside myself for more resources. But I'd like to be there for people, for help and kind of navigating that journey for themselves, because it can get confusing and it goes like this. Like it's not just straight up. It's like I still have really tough days where I'm trying to understand more about myself. And I think I've accepted that that's just how it is. And I just love myself for whatever I'm feeling to move forward from it. That's my long answer.
I mean, it makes sense. We call it people, places, and things, right? You can't go back to the old way of life, or you're going to end up right the fuck back where you were. I mean, it doesn't, and that's one of the cool things I like about the way I structure my show, right? Is that it's not necessarily always going to be me talking to somebody who's a hardcore addict, right? Or someone who's
Mm,
in mental health recovery, because there are so many different things that can not only help addicts like myself, but there's just people in general. Like we all have the same basic problems, right?
Mhm.
We all feel bad about ourselves sometimes, so we do this. Like when you
Mhm.
brought up the weight loss intervention thing, like I can think of a guy that was been on YouTube forever, Boogie 228, right? He used to be huge. It was a huge part of his personality. Um, and then he got, had weight loss surgery done. I think they like stapled his stomach or whatever. But then he gained back all the weight because he didn't change his habits, right?
Mhm.
And that's the same as if you're, doing drugs. If you're hanging out with the same people, or you have the same horrible sleeping habits, or you're not eating the right food, or you're not surrounding yourself with people just in general who are doing positive things, right? You're going to end up doing the same thing that you did
Mhm.
before. Like
Yeah.
we go back as human beings, we tend to go back to what's comfortable.
Mhm.
And what's comfortable isn't always what's best, right? Like it's it feels great eating a huge piece of German double chocolate layered cake, right? Like that stuff
Mhm.
tastes amazing, but sugar's so bad for you.
Mhm.
Like I haven't eaten sugar for the most part for a long time. Now,
Mhm.
I was creating excess amounts of sugar in my body because of the volume of alcohol I drank, right?
Mhm.
Like, um, so I still was doing the wrong thing, right? But in my mind, it made sense. I'm not eating sugar, so I'm fine. Like I
Mhm.
completely forgot about the fact that alcohol is a fucking sugar,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And
And a lot of people are overloaded on sugar and alcohol. And sugar is an addiction,
yep,
like 100%. I mean, they've done the studies. It's like sugar is more addictive than cocaine. Like, and it lights up the same parts of your brain, those dopamine areas, the dopamine centers. And the rats, they did a study with the rats, and it's like they wanted sugar more than they wanted the cocaine. So
yep.
it's just kind of crazy when you think about it. It's like we're all like latching on because I feel like addicts get such like a has like a negative like feeling around it, but I feel like we all have those tendencies to gravitate toward one thing or another when we're feeling a certain way, and it just shows up in different ways for different people. And once we understand what it is that's making us go toward that thing, then we can recognize and maybe like transform it to like a healthier addiction or a healthier habit, healthier tendencies instead of, I feel like, because I feel like I've dealt with this my entire life, like as literally as long as I can remember with like certain things, just understanding my relationship with certain uh foods or games or substances or whatever. It's just like it's all been the same transformation process. I've had to be aware of what I was doing, how it was negatively affecting me, and then kind of re-change my thoughts around it and then redirect my energy into a more positive way. And it's just the same with like any change that you're making in your life. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, I think the whole opiate crisis was kind of the eye-opening thing for most people whenever they're like, "Holy shit, anybody can be an addict?" Wow, that's crazy. It's like, yeah, you have no idea the things you can get
Hmm.
addicted to. You can get addicted to buying purses, shoes.
Yeah.
Hell, like I have to stop myself from buying shoes so much. My wife just doesn't get it. She's like, how can you be? She's like, what makes you think it's okay to buy a $300 pair of shoes? And I'm like, well, it's not really, but I want them because they're cool. And she's like, what the fuck is so cool about them? And I'm like, I don't know. But like, that's just one of my addictive things. Like,
Right.
does it really hurt anybody? No, not really. It's a pair of shoes.
Yeah.
But do I need to buy a pair of $300 Adidas's? No, no, I don't.
Yeah.
That's it's not
I
important.
totally get that. Mine's the nut butters right now. I have like 7 different jars of nut butter in my refrigerator, and that makes me feel really good. I have like options to go to in the fridge. I love it. And there was a point where I was actually eating way too much of it, where it was negatively affecting me. And I would like joke about it, but I was like so serious at the same time. Like I couldn't go to the bathroom and I started gaining weight because I was eating way too much nut butter. And I was like, yeah, yeah, there was an addiction right there too. Like I had to slow down like my intake and I was like, why am I doing this? Why am I eating so much nut butter?
Which is, it's so easy to slip into those things, especially things that, like we said at the beginning of this, that, are socially acceptable.
Yeah.
I mean, uh, sugar is by far one of the best examples of that, right? Because you grow up your
Hmm.
whole, as a kid, you eat all those sugary cereals, Kool-Aid, sweet tea, like all this
Hmm.
stuff, right? And it's like sugar's in so many different things. Like people don't think about the negative effect that it can have on you, and
Hmm.
it's not until you accept the fact that maybe this isn't great that,
Yeah.
you start to pay attention to how many things actually have sugar in them. Like I still drink sweet tea,
Hmm.
but I don't drink it all the fucking time.
Yeah.
I drink coffee every day, but I don't put sugar in it. I don't even
Hmm.
do cream. Like I put milk in it.
Hmm.
And that's honestly only started since I quit drinking, because the entire time I was getting all fucked up on alcohol and other shit, I wouldn't drink milk at all. No
Hmm.
dairy except for cheese. I would
Hmm.
eat cheese, but I
Hmm.
wouldn't drink any kind of dairy product because I knew that what was in my stomach was going to make it curdle, and then that's not fun for anybody.
Yeah.
And
And it's
um,
kind of crazy too when you stop, like when you really cut down on the drinking. I noticed that I started craving sugar because, like you're saying, the alcohol is a sugar. And when I stopped drinking so much, my body was like, where's that sugar? Like, so I was like craving more chocolate, more like sweets like that. And luckily I was aware of it. I would let myself have a little bit because I was just trying to manage it all. But yeah, so that's like another thing to look out for, I guess, if you're like coming off of that alcohol is expect a sugar craving, but just know that that's like your body being like freaking out and like craving something, but it doesn't mean that you actually need it.
yeah, yeah, sugar's fucked up.
Yeah, I
Oh,
could get that's the whole other like
oh yeah.
rant.
And see, that's what's crazy. One of the crazy things to me is like that your addict brain, at least mine, uh, will rationalize stuff out, right? Like I'm
Hmm.
not consuming sugar. And so that's healthy, but then completely ignore the 12 to 20 beers I'm drinking a day, or the
Hmm.
fifth of whiskey I drink in a night,
Hmm.
or, the massive amount of cannabis that I'm smoking because of my PTSD. Like,
Hmm.
I'm okay because I'm not consuming sugar like you other crazy fuckers, but I'm doing all this other shit. And
Yeah.
it leads back to it. Like I was talking to a customer, um and we were talking about, sugar in general, and she was like, yeah, I've noticed like I don't drink that much sugar, but then she started talking about her alcohol consumption, and she's like, I've cut back on it, but like there are times where it just goes off the rails and I'm not really drinking a lot. I just get really drunk really fast. And I'm like, well, what are those events like that where it's happening? And she was like, birthday parties and this and that and this and that. And I'm like, well, how many pieces of cake are you eating? And she's like, I don't know, two or three with a couple glasses of wine. And I was like, well, you're just consuming alcohol and then putting sugar on top of that, which your body is going to convert to alcohol because of the
Hmm.
alcohol that's already in your system. It's getting you drunker. And she was like, oh, I never thought about that. It's like, man,
That's crazy.
it's our bodies are insane
Yeah.
machines that do all kinds of crazy, wild fucking things. And
Hmm.
I dig that you've taken your experience. Now you're trying to help other people out with it, especially with the health part of it, because that's The body stuff is my next goal. Like I got to deal with the trauma. That's
Hmm.
finally, after 27 fucking years, it's time for me to start dealing with it. But at the same
Hmm.
time, like I need to start working out again, like I used to.
Hmm.
It's hard for me to put on muscle mass, but I think a lot of that was probably because I just wasn't really eating properly, most
Yeah,
likely.
I know it's all about the science behind it, and it's great that we know all these things now, and how
And
these things affect our bodies. And yeah, so it's just like the other side of it, I guess, that I'm doing, like all the health stuff that affects your body in like a good way, and biohacking per se to get the outcome that you want, I guess. But the trauma is honestly probably the most important part, um, behind all of it. Because if you don't address that, then everything else just might not
really,
work.
yeah. And because you're still going to hang on to that in those worst moments, and those worst moments are where that one's just not enough. And
Hmm.
that can quickly become 1,000.
Hmm.
So where can people find you? Like connect with you if they want to maybe, discuss their health or the way that they're eating or living or whatever. How can people find you?
Yes. So I'm on Instagram. I mean, I'm on a bunch of platforms, but Instagram, you can connect with me there, Emily Nader Fit, Nader. Um, and then also on my website too, you can book a session with me if you feel so inclined. Um, EmilyNaderFit.com. You can also connect with me there. Send me a message, ask me some questions. I'm happy to help in any way that I can. I just am so passionate about people being connected to themselves and like understanding again, like the whole their own patterns and habits and stuff. So
Yeah,
I'm here for you.
it's important. And actually doing something with it too. I want to remind people was super important because something my therapist constantly reminds me of is you're super self aware. You just ignore everything you're aware of. So,
Hmm.
pay attention to
Yeah,
what the fuck you're doing and do something
your
about it.
your
Action is
body's
key.
giving you yeah, your body's giving you signs and symptoms to say, like, wake up, like, hey, maybe you should stop. Pay attention. Hello. So yeah, and then taking action on that is key.
It is. It is. Well, thanks for coming on the show. We'll make sure we put
Thank
links in
you
the
for having me.
description for everybody. You're more than welcome. I like talking to people. It's a huge part of who I am. So, it works
Hmm.
well that I do this. But for the other people who are out there listening to this out in the world, we obviously don't know when or where you are listening to this, what time of day and all that fun shit, but I still appreciate it. I'm sure Emily does as well. And I hope you have a good day or evening or night or whatever the fuck it is that you're doing. So thanks for consuming, and we'll see you next week.